All right, there we go. All right, so welcome to the March 18th meeting, everyone. Tonight we'll be having VITA after the meeting, so if you can and you have the proper training, feel free to stay afterwards, and we will work on some tax returns and help out the United Way with their very large community service project that they do every year. Some other announcements, just kind of miscellaneous things. We have the nursing home letters community service project as well going on right now. So if you've got a few extra time, a little extra few minutes here and there, type you out a letter to one of the Wayne County residents at the Wayne County Nursing Home, and email it to me and attach a picture of yourself with it. And we will send those to the residents that way they can socialize safely with other people and get to meet some new faces. So we did it in the fall and it was a really successful event, and we're hoping to do it again in the spring right before Easter this time. So get those to me in by April 1st. Like I said, you can just email them to me. Last time we used the mail system and it wasn't as reliable, so this time we're going to go email, and hopefully that'll be a little bit better. And another note to mention, we have an officer position still available, reporter, which is kind of our secretary. So if you are interested at all in those positions, let me know, or that position, let me know, and I will talk to you a little bit more about it and put you on our interested in an officer position list. And all that jazz, because we do our officer transition going into the new school year. So the new officers will take a hold of the reins from fall 2021 till spring 2022. And that's actually all the announcements I have as of now. So I'll go ahead and hand over the reins to Jason Kelly. He's here from Hess, Stewart, and Campbell tonight. Had to reschedule him because of the wonderful weather we were having about a month ago. And so we're here and we're doing it, and we rescheduled. So really excited about that.
All right, well, thank you for having me. And that winter storm was definitely a problem. I didn't have power for multiple days, and I have a couple six-month-old twins, and that was an issue. So, anyways, I am Jason Kelly. Like she said, I'm from Hess, Stewart, and Campbell. I graduated from Marshall in 2012 and 2013 with my master's in the 3+2 program, and I started as an intern at Hess, Stewart, and Campbell after I graduated undergrad, and then I've been here ever since. So going on close to 10 years. I'm on the audit staff, but since we're a mid-sized firm, I still do 1040s and things like that, and tax returns. So I do tax returns for my clients on the audit side, and then some 1040s whenever the crunch time is here. So that's a little introduction. I looked at the list of all the topics that you guys recommend, and I figured I'd make a selection of a few and just kind of go through them and see where we're at the end. It's kind of weird talking to no one, but I don't do these very often. So I'll start with business writing, and one of the topics is how often do you write, or do you need to know how to write, or something along those lines. So I was just going to go through some of my thoughts on that. I think my number one idea is that you need to know your audience whenever you're writing, like an email, for example. So for example, we talk to people ranging from the CFO or the CEO of a company down to all the way at the bottom. You got your AP clerks and the lowest level of the rung. So you got to know who you're talking to whenever you're writing an email, and you got to try to be as clear and concise as possible. And then the best thing to do is just provide examples of things that you've received in the past. So one of the most common things I do as an auditor is we start an audit, and then we go through and ask for a litany of client prepared documents, and the frequency with which you have to send another email, send a clarifying email, all that stuff is extremely common. So as concise and clear as you can be, so you prevent the need to go back and forth to try to get a basic document. And by the way, I guess you guys can use the chat thing if you have to ask, if you want to ask any questions, or if anybody wants to unmute and just interject and ask any questions as we're going along. I am definitely fine with just being interrupted. Yeah, so one of the most common things that we actually have to ask for again is we'll ask for a document, and then if you're auditing 1231 clients and you ask for a document and you're asking in February, they'll give you the February document. So it's down to the most basic detail of like the 1231-2020 AP aging type of thing. So that's my first thought. For tax clients, a lot of times you're dealing with people who are very uninformed with the tax law. So as little deep information is required to present the idea that you can get across is recommended. That way you don't bring up new questions, new problems, new explanations that have to go through. So again, the more concise and clear you can be, the better. I know that whenever I was in school, a lot of times professors will have you write a 2-3 page paper on a topic, and that's fine, and that's good to be able to have that skill. But once you get into a work situation, it's the shortest you can do it. I don't know if anybody's ever watched The Office, but there's an episode where Kevin, the accountant from The Office, tries to shortcut everything, and why say more word when few word do trick. That's kind of the idea, but be a little bit more clear than that. And then I'll actually interject a couple of my biggest failures, I'd say, as a great way to learn. So one of the things that I would recommend is a rule of thumb is anytime you're going to send an email to a client, assume that email is going to be forwarded to the CEO or the owner of the company. Because if you say something and just unclear or a way that's not worded properly, and you wouldn't really matter if you sent it to the AP clerk. Well, that might get forwarded up the chain. So a story about myself is that, actually I don't know if I want to tell it if I'm being recorded, but I guess I will. We had a client which was fighting with us on fees. So we were talking about whether or not we wanted to go out and start working on the audit before they sign the engagement letter with a fee or not, because they might end up trying to fight us on the back end until we got the signed engagement letter. And that's technically best practice, is get the engagement letter before you start work, but it's common business where, the CEO has it, they've agreed to it verbally, you just haven't got the physical signed document yet. So I was told to just send the email like, hey, we're going to postpone a week or something like that, but it wasn't explained what to say. So I said, oh yeah, we're not coming out until we have the engagement letter signed. And that was not well received, interestingly enough, because that did get forwarded along. So wording is important, and just keep that in mind. And I think this is in the same section of business writing. I'll move on to the next topic. So do accountants have to write? I've kind of mentioned already the email, you have to write that, but for audits, we have to write notes to financial statements very commonly. So for example, the PPP loans that are out right now, that's a note that is required, and we have to come up with the wording of the notes ourselves, generally speaking. Some clients at bigger businesses will prepare their own financial statements, but that's not necessarily the norm at a smaller or mid-sized firm. That's the bigger companies. Another thing you have to write all the time is when you're doing work papers as an auditor, You always pretty much have to write the purpose of the work paper, the method of what you're trying to accomplish and how, and then your conclusion on what you found while doing the work. So you need to be able to write that clearly and concisely, and in a way that portrays what you actually accomplished with that work paper and what the end result of it is. And you need to be able to write that in a way that your manager and a third party could look at it and understand it. So I talked a lot about the emailing and the whole idea, so I'll just move on to another topic. One of the other ones was job hunting, and what do you look for in a potential new hire? So this kind of changes a little bit on whether or not you're looking for an internship or a full-time position, but I think a GPA is an obvious good starting point. You know, if you have a high GPA, you're obviously going to put it on there. But one of the things I was thinking about is that maybe you switched from a science major where, you know, you weren't doing too well, or, you know, you didn't like your classes. My worst classes were like geology and art, because I don't care at all about rocks or paintings, not a bit. So I think I got C's on those. But in my accounting GPA was, I don't know, high 3 something. So if there is a significant difference between your GPA versus your accounting GPA, it's probably a good idea to just put the accounting GPA on there. That's from my perspective. Maybe other people may not like that, but that seems to make sense to me. For an internship, you know, your resume is less stringent, less important to some degree, because there's a lower level of expectation. But previous work experience and, you know, just normal jobs. I worked at Kmart, so, you know, that type of stuff to me, whenever I look at a resume, I like to see something like that. Like I see that you've worked before, you have a little bit of a understanding of a workplace environment and some of the things that go into working for a business. So that's good. Charitable activities and student organizations are good, like Beta Alpha Psi, obviously. And that kind of gets both of those things, because I know you do charity work while you're in Beta Alpha Psi. And then for a full-time position, an internship is really good, because, you know, you've gotten a taste of the accounting world a little bit, and then everything I've mentioned before is also useful in addition to the internship. But an internship is a really nice plus when you're going for a full-time position. Another item in that job hunting section is tips for the interviewing process, and then ways to get rid of jitters. I know that whenever I was finishing school and going through the interview process, I think the biggest fear is the unknown of what questions are going to be asked. So Google is an excellent tool for this. As you just Google what are common interview questions, and you don't want to. You can kind of script out an answer, but you don't want to be a robot. So you interject some flair into your preconceived answer to questions, but using interview questions you can find on the internet is good. I believe Beta Alpha Psi used to do practice interviews. I'm not sure if that's a thing anymore, especially during coronavirus, but that's a good starting point. You know, if you feel a little bit of the pressure, and then the more you do it, the more comfortable you'll feel doing it. One of the things I did is that I actually kept a little notebook in my car, and then after I left an internship interview, I would try my best to remember all the questions, and when I got out to the car, I would write down every single question I could, and then that I could remember, and that way for the next interview, okay, well, this may be something that's a more common question for the Huntington or Charleston firms that you're going to be talking to. I think another thing is if you can tell a story in your answer, I think that's a good method. That way you'll feel more comfortable, because you're just working off memory instead of trying to come up with something clever. So if you, for example, one of the common difficult questions is like, what is your greatest or biggest weakness or something like that, and everybody wants to turn that into a positive. But you know, one of the things I've read about is that maybe it's a good idea to actually show a negative, but implement a story and a method that you've implemented to improve that weakness. So, you know, I guess if you're going to say that your biggest weakness is that you are a perfectionist or something like that. That's one of the most common, where I guess you try to say that slows you down. So maybe you try to turn that into, I implemented this process to maybe be less precise so I could be able to complete a project accurately, but in a more respectable time frame. Something like that. You know, you just take a negative and then try to interject the way that you've improved that negative. Here's another one of my personal failures. Do not take your cell phone into an interview. Seems obvious, and everybody knows this, right? But I had my phone set to vibrate, but I had an auto feature that turned it on to loud at a certain time throughout the day because I'd usually not have class at that time. Well, I had an interview at that time, so that didn't help me. So just don't even take in your phone. It's just not worth it. It's not, there's no benefit to it. So if anybody is like me, don't do it. So I'm going to go to the next topic, and I guess if anybody has any questions, I'll kind of stop briefly, see if anybody will type anything or turn off their mute. Give a minute. All right. So one of the other recommended topics is what is it like transitioning to a work environment instead of being in school? And I kind of wanted to take a little bit of a different path on this because I think I've talked about this before, that, you know, coming out of school, you have a decent baseline knowledge of general accounting principles and things like that. That's the point of school. But you're walking into a whole different field once you actually start in the real world. And from an auditor's perspective, I took the auditing classes, I took the grad level auditing classes, and it was good. And you know, it's good to have the baseline knowledge, but it's all on you to fill out a work paper now, and your manager has to review it, and it is uncommon. You don't experience it in any other situation, and school is a good way to teach it, but you know, once you get out there, it's the real world and it's different. So one of the things that I always recommend is for auditing or tax, there's always work papers from the prior year. So you should always, well, I guess I shouldn't say always, if it's a new client, there's not, but generally speaking, there is a work paper from the prior year that you can open up and look at, read it, try to gain an understanding of, like I mentioned earlier, the purpose, method, and conclusion is generally at the top. So you read it, you say, why are we doing this work paper? What are we trying to accomplish? And then the method is how are we doing that? What tests are we doing to reach that end goal? And your conclusion is, you know, we found no AP accruals that were needed when we looked at checks in January that should have been accrued that weren't. You know, that's your conclusion. So if you look at the prior year, you'll be able to have a good idea of the point of the work paper and how you're supposed to reach that. You also have audit programs that you follow. It's you know, it's a step-by-step list of everything you need to do for this section. You know, cash, you look at the bank rec, you look at the bank statement, you look at the confirmation, you send and each of these things. And it tells you what you need to do. But that's what I normally talk about. And the same thing goes for taxes as well. You know, you'll have the work papers from the prior year tax folder where you'll have all their 1099s and everything like that. But I think a good way to kind of replicate this is that you've done the tax classes, but then whenever you go into the VITA program, if you don't do it, I recommend doing it because it's a little taste of the real world type of thing. You know, I remember taking my tax classes and then I get into the VITA room and I am just nervous. I don't really know what I'm doing. I know that, oh, W-2s are taxable. What does that mean? I don't know. So it's a really good way to get a taste of it in that VITA program. So that's a good example of the difference. But anyways, that's what I generally talk about for that topic, but I'm going to take it a different way. And I'm going to, can you do a poll? Is that a thing? Doesn't look like it. Anyways, I want to take it to personal finance after you get out of college, because I don't know of any general personal finance classes in high school or even college, and that's something that is never talked about, and we don't really teach it in school, and it's a mind-numbingly stupid thing that we don't teach. So I was gonna do a poll that just said like, yeah, what's up?
Speaking of personal finance, I was going to get your take on this because a lot of people,
Sure.
when they get out of college, they get a newer job and they go and get that new vehicle first thing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's a smart thing to do because it's reliable? You don't have to worry about fixing it, or do you think it's kind of a waste of money getting a 20 model, 21?
First, fresh out of college, I definitely don't think it's wise because most people, generally speaking, have some kind of car. It might be a beater in college, but the longer you can hold on to it, as long as it's not a money pit and you're not throwing thousands of dollars after a car that's only worth thousands of dollars, the longer you can hold that car, the better, generally speaking. So like one of the problems I have with new cars, I'll probably never buy a new car ever in my entire life, because a new car, as soon as you put the key in the ignition and press the gas pedal, loses, 20, 30% of the value. If you try to sell it back to the dealership one day later, they're not giving you anywhere near what you paid for it. So the value of a reliable car is good, but if you have one that's decent, I would stick with that. And then if you can get, just a used car, a few model years older or something like that, there's nothing wrong with those cars. And I think I was looking, the average car payment in the United States is like $500 to $600 a month for 5 to 7 years, ballpark, depending on the type of car and everything like that. So that is, let me see. I mean, that's $6,000 a year. If you pay that, let's see. I think I was looking at it. If you have a car for like 10 years, that's like $60,000 that you could save for that $500 payment. If you can just keep not an old beater car, but if you can just get a new car, a relatively new car, and have it for 10 years, that's, instead of paying $60,000, you probably paid what, 10, 15, 20,000 for that car instead of 60. I mean, you're saving a lot in that regard. And then you have cash to pay for your next one, and then you just continue on not having car payments. That's my plan, because I don't care about my car anymore. When I was in college, I cared about my car. I don't care anymore. It doesn't matter to me. But good question. Same, in the same vein. Go ahead.
I was going to ask you one more about interviewing. I'm sure the ladies probably won't care about this one, but more of a grooming thing, because I see that you have a beard, and sometimes I like having a beard, but whenever you go to an interview, I always shave, just because, I don't know, past knowledge tells you, people tell you shave if you have an interview. Did you have a beard whenever you first got your job, or did you wait to grow it, or?
I did have a beard. So yeah, generally speaking, it's probably recommended to shave, and it depends on who you're interviewing with. Because we have a partner here that has a beard too, but we also had a partner that really didn't like beards. So you got to kind of weigh it out. If you don't really care either way, shaving is a safe option. But I didn't shave it. Personally, I have a problem with, like, if somebody's super strict like that, like, oh, you can't have facial hair. Do I really want to work there? If that's something I really want, I mean, probably not. Because then, you have horror stories of where people can work. My wife, she's also a CPA. She's worked in industry, and like she's worked at places where if she took a sick day, like they required a doctor's note. Like, listen, this isn't high school anymore. Like, what are we doing here? So I think that if you want to have a beard, it's easy to say that though once you have a job. That's the other thing, is that I'm speaking from the other side where I already have a job, so I don't have to worry about that.
First and then go for it.
Yeah, and you can get an idea of the culture while you're there. If you see a couple of people wearing beards, you kind of, oh, okay, I can wear a beard here. Or some places don't like it, but I think that's a trend that's changing. As the old people, we just kind of shove the old people off. We get more accepting of beards and longer hair. Longer hair for, I'm getting recorded again, so I shouldn't say this, but longer hair for men is still a frowned upon thing for people at some levels. I don't care what somebody looks like, but some people do, and the best case scenario is clean shaven, shoes shine, suit, all the old style thinking, but long term, I think we're moving away from that. But yeah, you're probably right. The best case scenario is to go ahead and shave, as long as it's not like really important to you. Okay. Let's see. I guess I will try to use a.
I just wanted to ask a question, because you were talking about how, now that the older generation is being pushed out of the top positions and more relaxed grooming standards are being, I guess, enveloped. How would you look at someone who has tattoos and piercings? Because I mean, in general, it's okay, in society, because I see, you can go out in town and see, executives that have piercings and tattoos, but how in the CPA arena would that be viewed?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of the same idea of the beard right now, is that we're still in that area where that is probably if you can cover it up, I probably would, is the situation that we're at right now. I personally, I still have a little bit of reservations of like a face tattoo, like Tekashi 6ix9ine or something like that. I probably wouldn't recommend it, but I think it's kind of the same idea. We're moving away from really caring about that. You got who was the CEO, Jack Dorsey. He looks, he has this long beard. He unkept really too. I mean, but he's from the younger generation. He started the company, so he has that ability to do that. I don't know if he started it, but he's the CEO, so he can do it. Is that good? Okay. All right. Anybody else? I'm going to try to do my own little poll. Has anybody taken a personal finance class in high school or college or middle school or anything like that? Just type like a 1 in chat if you have. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything. Well, I'm not in the herd link thing. Should I be in that, Ashlee?
No, not necessarily. That was the very first link that I posted.
Okay, well, if you don't care to let me know if somebody says something to me in that, because I'm not in that. I was just using the Zoom chat. But basically, I'm not getting any responses like it seems like anybody got a personal finance class, so I think it's probably a good idea to talk about it. So one of the first things you do whenever you have when you okay, I got another comment. All right, one of the first things you do whenever you come out of when you get a new job, day one, you're filling out your W-4, you're filling out your personnel forms, and then if you're full time, you're probably also filling out a retirement plan sign up form. And to take it back to pretty much basics, most retirement plans, 401k plans, have a match feature. So there's a safe harbor that's pretty common, is that if you contribute at least 5 or 6%, they'll match 3 or 4%. So basically you're getting 3 or 4% for free of their money and not your own. So best case scenario, assuming you don't have a massive amount of debt, is to take the match at the very least. And the best case scenario is, if you can, saving 10 to 15% of your income. And obviously, the more you can, the better. But a decent baseline is like if you get 10 to 15%, and then you get your employer's 3 or 4% on top of that, you're setting yourself up good for the long term. And I have a few files I'm going to try to share my screen just to show some of the information. Basically, I think there's the quote, I can't remember who said it, but the eighth wonder of the world is compound interest. So, and I know I may be dumbing this down too much, but the idea is that the more money you have, the more interest you earn on that, and then that compounds each year, and year after year after year after year, you're able to earn more and more and more without doing anything. So the earlier you can start investing, the better, and the consistency with which you invest is important. So start early, keep going throughout your life, and you will be extremely surprised at the amount of money that you're able to save. I'm going to try to pull up some files here and just use these as examples. So one of the common things I hear from like young people who don't really have jobs yet is how there's no way to be rich or anything like that, and there's no way to save enough money, and et cetera, and I think it's just based on the fact that people don't know what to do. So here's the first chart I wanted to show. Let's see if I can share my screen. Here. So this is a super basic, can you guys see it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So this is a super basic calculation I did in just a retirement calculator. So this is assuming you start really early. So like, let's say you're 22 and you work until you're 62. That's 40 years. So this is if you invest $500 a month, which is only $6,000 a year, over 40 years, and this is earning 9%, 7%, or 5%. That's assuming you can manage to save $6,000 a year when you first get out of college, assuming nothing too crazy. And even if a 5% rate of return, which is bad, if you do 5% rate of return in the stock market, you are not doing something right. Historically, technically things can change, but this is the general sense. The stock market usually does between 7 to 10%. So this is just $6,000 a year contributed over 40 years with an average 7% rate of return. So I don't know. This is the type of stuff where when people say that you can't save money or you can't get a lot of money in retirement, I just don't understand it. I think it's just based on a lack of a lot of knowledge, pretty much. So I will try to go back to not sharing my screen. Another thing that, let's see, I got another 20 minutes, so I think I'm good. All right, so another thing that isn't really talked about is there's a traditional and a Roth IRA and 401k. So a traditional 401k is you're taking a tax deduction now, so you don't pay taxes on your salary whenever you contribute it to your retirement plan. But when you take the money out in retirement, you have to pay taxes on everything in your account. And a Roth is a way of contributing where you pay taxes on your salary that you contribute. So if you do contribute $6,000, you still pay the taxes on the $6,000, but you do not pay any taxes on anything that you take out whenever you get done. Sorry, I'm trying to get a calculator up real quick. So you pay no taxes on anything that you contribute over the entire, of your entire retirement. You pay no taxes. So let's, just out of the calculation, we were looking at that chart, and I'll put it back up real quick. If you have, let's say, the 7% return, if you have $1.2 million in your 401k at age 62, you've contributed $240,000 if you do $6,000 a year for 40 years. So that means that basically, let's just round down, $1 million of it is earnings, $950, whatever. That is all taxable in a traditional and not at all taxable in a Roth. So if you start early, the best case scenario is to be able to do Roth, and you have just tax-free money when you get to retirement. Let's see. I had like a few tips, like 5 tips that I'm going to go through whenever you're talking about investing. So I said a couple of them earlier. So start early, invest consistently over your life. Don't try to time the market. I don't care how good GameStop's doing right now. I don't know if we have any multimillionaires from GameStop in here, but I doubt it. Don't try to time the market. It's statistically shown to be very bad. Just consistently invest over time. Pick decent options. So here's another thing I was going to show is, let's see. I pulled the retirement options from my retirement plan here at work. I'm going to try to bring that up. So you should see investment options. So we have like the name of the investment, the asset class, the category, 1, 3, 5, and 10 year term. Anybody care to confirm that's working?
We can see it.
Okay, good. So to give you an idea of all the different types of funds, there are these, if you see right here, 2005, 2010, 15, 20, 25, 30. These are investment funds that were designed to where you pick the year in which you're going to retire the closest to. So if you think you're going to retire in 2060, you just do the math, you know, your age, whenever the year is 2060, you would invest in those and you'd never have to change it. And these get more and more conservative over time. So right now, this 2065 fund is going to have like 0 in bonds and the most risky stock they can think of pretty much right now. And then each 5 years, as this goes down, they're going to put a 2070 one after this, and this one's going to become a little more conservative, get a little bit more bonds. And then over the years, and then you get down to this, you have this 2010 fund, which is probably 80–90% bonds and a little bit of stocks. That's to give you an idea. These are common in retirement plans now, and they're fine. I'm not a fan of these generally because I don't want to invest in bonds, because if I'm going to have money, I want to grow my money, and bonds don't do that, especially anymore. A bond right now is paying pennies. You might get inflation on a bond. That's my personal preference, but a good way to evaluate a bond or a retirement fund option or stock option or anything like that is you can look at the 1, the 3, the 5, and the 10-year life of the fund type of returns. I love when it's life of fund. That way I can see that it's been it's been around for 20 years and it's done X return. So here's like the Vanguard Growth Fund. It's got 45% return in 1 year. Over the last 3 years, it's averaged 21%. Over the last 5, it's averaged 22%. Over the life, it's averaged 16%. So that is a good way to evaluate the funds. And the longer it's done extremely well, the better. Generally speaking, mutual funds do not do as well as just the S&P 500 fund. There's a classic study or bet that was done with Warren Buffett and hedge fund managers, where he bet that these hedge fund managers couldn't beat the S&P 500 on over like a 10-year period, and that ended a few years ago, and the hedge funds had to donate a bunch of money to charity because they weren't able to beat the S&P 500. So just be aware of how a fund's done over the long term. And you can probably find a few that have beat the market, but very few. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at an investment option. Let's see. A lot of times in retirement plans, there's an investment advisor option to where they just kind of direct your money for you. So you just turn off your brain and let it go until you retire, and then you find out how much money you have. So I am not a fan of that type of option in a retirement plan. I think it's better if you take the time to do a little bit of learning and at least get a general consensus of or a general understanding of what you're investing in, which is actually my last tip, is only invest in investments you understand. So I wish I would have invested in Bitcoin, but I've never invested in Bitcoin, and I don't understand Bitcoin, and I'll accept that I'm not going to get rich off Bitcoin because I don't understand it at all. But if we look at these funds here, we can look at all the options that I was able to fit on this page, and this is almost all of them. And I typically look at this last column, show the best return. We have one that has done 16%, and then here this one's done 19%. But that's a life of fund. It hasn't done anything in 3 or 5 years because it's a new fund. So this is skewed. So if I were to ask what investment in these options you guys would pick, I don't know. It seems fairly simple to me that the best in the 1-year category is this one by about 1%. The best in the 3-year category, it's this one. 5-year, it's this one. 10-year life of fund, it's this one. And that's a pretty much diversified fund because it's an overall growth fund. And I could charge you 1% to tell you that this fund has done better in the 3, 5, and 10-year categories, and put you in that and get to take 1% from you for doing very little. I'm going to show you another chart I have here. So this is just a quick little Excel calculation I did. So we start year one, you guys graduate here in a couple months and you start your new job, you start contributing the $6,000 a year. And in this scenario, you're a bad employee because you never get a raise and you can never raise your contributions. So you need to work on that. But let's just assume $6,000 a year. And we have just an average investment return of 7%, just like I did on the other one. So at the end of the day, you have that 1.2 number we looked at earlier. Same calculation. Let's say that you did the exact same investments, but you did it when you took that 1% fee of your investments. Let's see. Here's our fees paid. Over 40 years, you paid $140,000 to earn what the market returns in this calculation. I don't know what I did with this spreadsheet because I changed something, but the gist is this fee is 1%. I just did a rough calculation of your beginning balance, and over your life, you're paying $137,000 in fees. And that's assuming you never increase this contribution amount and just take that down. Let's say you get a little raise there and you start, now it's 170. That's just to give you a rough, this is a really rough calculation, obviously. All right, I got a few more minutes. I'm going to run through this last one quick. Whenever, I'm going to stop sharing my screen as well. All right, I'm going to try to, this is pretty basic, but try to think critically about articles that you see or that you read about. One of the ones that drives me up the wall is whenever I read about the amazing benefits of the mortgage interest deduction. I imagine everybody's heard of that, or maybe they haven't, but you're going to read about it. If you Google, you know, what are tips on my taxes or something like that, or what are my deductions that I should do? How do I pay less taxes? Should I pay off my mortgage? There's tons of articles out there that says you shouldn't pay off your mortgage because you lose the mortgage interest deduction. This infuriates me because to take the mortgage interest deduction, you have to itemize on your taxes. And in 2019, less than 14% of people itemized their taxes. So 86% of people got no benefit from paying that mortgage interest. And then if you do itemize, let's say you can take the deduction if you itemize, which is difficult because you got to have $24,000 of itemizable expenses. But if you just keep it around just for fun, you are paying the bank $1. So you don't have to pay the IRS the tax rate on that dollar. So it makes no sense to just keep it around just for fun. So that's it. I was going to just leave the last few minutes for questions. Comments telling me I'm wrong. I want to talk to the Bitcoin millionaire. Jonathan, is that you?
No, I'm GameStop.
You got the Bitcoins and the GameStop?
Yeah. No, I should probably sell before it bottoms out. But anyways, yeah, I've never been in a situation where I have a good salary coming in. Obviously, I'm still in school. But whenever you do get there, do you find it pretty easy to set $500 aside every month and still have money for everything else?
Well, all right, I'll flip the question around right now. Let's say you come out of school and you got a salary, let's just say $40,000. How do you spend $40,000 right now?
Mm-mm.
So can you live on less than 40,000 minus 6,000?
I live with my mom right now though, and I'm hoping to change that soon.
Yeah. But the gist is, yeah, I think if you pay yourself first, you set that aside. It's not an option to not put it in, it's easy to have lifestyle creep where you know, I get a raise of $10,000. I'm making 50 now. Yay. Now I get to go and I buy a new couch. I upgrade my Comcast package, even though Comcast is a terrible company. I get my, you know, the sports package, all this stuff climbs and climbs and climbs. And then all that extra income is out the door and you never even saw it. You didn't save any extra and all that stuff. So I think if you take it out in the front part and you just agree with yourself, this is what I'm saving, then yeah, you're fine. And you know, I think if you do just like 5 or 6% and you take the match, you're getting 10% of your salary right there. The best case is more, but if you just do 5 or 6% of your salary, you got 10%.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And you know, it sets you up long term because I mean, you look at that chart. Did you? And you don't have to come back on necessarily, but did you think that it was possible to save over $1 million with just a small $6,000 a year?
No, I didn't think it was going to get nearly that high.
Yeah, it's one of the weird, crazy calculations that doesn't make any sense until the numbers just do. And you know, like I said earlier, this chart's it's obviously a rough calculation because you're assuming 7% every single year. That doesn't factor in, you know, if the market drops 10%, but then the next year goes up 25. It's just a rough baseline. Let's say I'm half wrong. You say you still have $600,000-$700,000 at the end of the day. I mean, and I'm not half wrong, but let's say I was. You know, you still have a decent amount of money if you're able to do it over the long term. Anybody else got a comment, question? Tell me I'm wrong. You definitely want that mortgage interest. Anybody?
I have yet to be able to use mortgage interest on my house because we don't pay enough in interest to be able to claim it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, a couple years ago, the new tax law made it to where your state and local deduction was limited to $10,000 and you need to get up to $24,000. So a lot of people used to rely on that state tax deduction to be able to even itemize, and that got cut. So it's even harder to get there now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't even put the interest in my tax return because I don't care. There's no chance I'm ever getting to $24,000 of deductible itemizable expenses unless I have a huge illness. But
And for the younger kids, as soon as you get that first job, start saving. Don't wait till later in life. Start saving early.
mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, I showed that chart earlier. Let me just bring it back up real quick, just to, you know, piggyback off what you just said there. Like, if you look at this chart, that's the Excel spreadsheet, right?
Yes.
So like your first year, it's like, oh, I got $420. Who cares? This is worthless. But like you reach a tipping point where, you know, after let's say 10, 12 years, your investments are earning more than you're even putting in, and then it just explodes over time. And this is if you're 62. Let's say you work until you're, what is this? Oh, come on. Let's just take this out another 5 years. This is this blows people's mind too. You're still contributing your $6,000 a year. What did I add? 7 years? Let's say you work until you're 68 or whatever. Well, now you got $2 million. Let's say I'm half wrong. You got $1 million. I don't know. It blows my mind that we we tell people that they can't get to retirement, but this is on $6,000 a year for your entire career with zero addition. This isn't even your match either. So, anybody got any questions, comments? Or boot me off.
Does anybody have any questions? No? Doesn't sound like it. Thank you so much for talking to us tonight. It was very interesting. And I know as a soon-to-be college graduate, I appreciate all the investment advice, because that is something that for some reason people expect accountants to know a lot about, but we're not really taught much about it. You know, anytime
Yep.
somebody says, what major are you? And I say accounting, they're always like, oh, you know about investments. And I'm like, sure. Not really.
Yeah, you're good at math, right?
Yeah. Yeah. All that calculus is real good at math.
Yeah. I hope it was
Thank
good.
you.
I think that it's a loss. You know, it's a topic we don't talk about that absolutely should be talked about. I hope it'll be useful for you.
Oh yeah. It's already been useful for me, at least.
All right. Thank you.